Well, let's move forward. You know, we were walking in this morning and I saw Linda carrying things and I said, oh, that's so good you brought your brain. Right? And I just applaud you too for being here. I think one of the things Linda and I we prayed together and talked about, you know, what's going to be helpful for this group. One, we just were encouraged that you know, had expressed an interest and that the event was happening. But two, I think that in our culture, there's such a fear about Alzheimer's disease. We get fearful for ourselves, and we get fearful when we see it in other people. And so I think part of what we're trying to do, we want to give you skills, but we're also trying to replace that fear with just some knowledge and some better understanding. We have old videos on our bookshelf in our office that say things like Alzheimer's disease, losing it all, right? So no wonder we're fearful, or maybe you've heard the term, the loss of self. You know, well, of course that's so fearful. And what we're finding, and it's so encouraging to me, research is looking for cure, but they're also looking for ways that we can manage this disease. I was at the Rush presentation that Linda had mentioned, and one of the blessings of it is we heard from individuals who had early onset, which means they were diagnosed before the age of 65. And one of the things that came forward is they talked about their memory disability. And then they told us all the things that they were doing in life, and they even would track, you know, here I find that my memory's pretty good, but if I do this, then I can tell a difference. And so there was much more of a framework of this is a condition, what things can I do to manage it and to move forward? And so it takes away some of that dark heaviness and instead really gets us looking forward of what's the best way that we can manage this disease or support people who are doing so themselves. So in this next session, session 3 is called Supporting Daily Routines. And what we really want to get to is, there it is looking at just how people's experience of the day is going to change. And so really the first goal is that you'd be able to describe how the progression of dementia affects daily routines for the diagnosed individual. The second one, that we want to give you ideas so that you could give 4 examples of meaningful activities for individuals who have dementia. And then third, that you would be able to state some of the benefits of engaging individuals in meaningful interactions. I think that video is just a great example of engagement. It's tempting to see someone in late stage and think, I can't connect. Or if I did, I'm not sure that would matter. And what they tell us about Alzheimer's disease is we can't cure it yet, but we can treat it. And one of the treatment approaches Linda spoke about is medication. But the other treatment approach that they will tell you, they call it a therapeutic environment. And what does that mean? At the core, it says that the way that caregivers or loved ones interact with people who have dementia, the way that we structure the day or engage them in conversation or activity, it actually influences their experience with the disease. So we can do it because it seems nice and it seems loving and caring, and that's great because it is. But it's bigger than that because it actually influences how the disease progresses in their quality of life. We actually, this little green flyer is hot off the press, so we had to show you that this morning. We are at Providence creating some formalized memory support programs. We offer memory support. What we're doing is we're kind of specializing the care that we give under that theory that if we can create environments that engage people, that bring them to that place of well-being, it's going to impact their experience with Alzheimer's disease or with other dementias. So it really gets pretty exciting when we recognize we can bless people and we can actually impact their experience as well. So this is review for you. You already know this, right? Alzheimer's disease follows a progression. Linda talked through that. And I just brought it forward again because we think through the ways that individuals' abilities are going to shift and change. But then in terms of supporting them, we just take a look at, okay, how does that affect their day? What does that mean? So in early stage, what we're probably going to find is that while the person is needing some support, because the diagnosis says it impacts their daily functioning, right? They're still probably very independent. They're probably able to do many things on their own. We talk about bathing, grooming, dressing, all those activities of daily living. You move on to the middle stage, and we find that people need some help with most of their ADLs. It can vary. We see some safety issues emerging at this point, confusion that can shift according to the time of day. Moving on then to late stage, people are needing more help. So more is on the caregiver to get them dressed, to help with feeding probably. Sometimes there's difficulty with walking and speaking. There can be issues with incontinence, and then on to that final stage. So again, you see the changes are happening in the brain. That's the root cause of what's happening. And then as this progression occurs, their daily experience really changes. And here's this word again that Linda highlighted: flexibility is key. We know that the daily routines are going to need to shift and change. Now, how many of you love significant changes in your life? It's hard, right? So I think as we care for people and as we try to support caregivers, one of the things that we need to remember is it feels like the game board keeps changing. You know, I had it figured out, but now this is different, and I need to shift and I need to adjust again. So I think people often find themselves kind of back to that assessment phase. What's happening here? What do we need to shift and adjust to make it work now? And if you can approach it with that kind of flexibility and creative thinking, it's really helpful. Okay, I thought it might be helpful just a little bit. What is the experience of dementia like? Jane mentioned a really good book. She's recommending it again. This is just a quote from a book called Show Me the Way to Go Home. Let me just read this for us. It says, I'm becoming more and more withdrawn. It is much easier to stay in the safety of my home than to expose myself to people who don't understand. People who raise their eyebrows when I have trouble making the right change at the cash register, or when I'm unable to think of the right words when asked a question. When I was listening to the panel of individuals of early onset, somebody raised their hand and asked the question, what is the thing that you're most afraid of? What do you think was the response to that? I may be 67, I got a diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease. What do you think when they research that? What are people most afraid of?
What other people think of me?
It's exactly it. It wasn't dying, it wasn't getting lost or hit by a car, it was the experience of shame. What if people recognize my deficits and I feel embarrassed and ashamed? So it's just so much support for what we're doing. I was grocery shopping just 2 days ago, and there was a couple shopping together, and the wife wandered off to get something, and the gentleman started a conversation with a worker, and I was a little ways down, and he was talking, and it was hard to understand, and the worker finally said, I cannot understand a word you're saying. And I kind of, my ears perk up because I think, oh, I bet I know what's happening. And he tried again, and she said, I do not know what you're saying to me. And then finally the wife came back at that point, and she turned the husband and she said, stop, he's not well. And they moved forward. And I just thought, for that worker, all that is a knowledge deficit. It's just a misunderstanding of what we're seeing. And so this kind of conversation is so valuable. I don't want you to leave with fear. What if I say the wrong thing? But I want you just to have an understanding, sort of a softening, because the interaction becomes very different, but we want to keep engaged and keep trying. Usually if we're not doing it well, people will tell us, right? They get uncomfortable, and then we think, oh, let me try something different. Okay, so we're going to support people through this change. If you look broadly at the experience of the diagnosis, you're going to find there's some key points where people can use your support and your love. Probably the first one is sharing the diagnosis. If you imagine sitting in a clinician's office and receiving the news, she has Alzheimer's disease, or you have Alzheimer's disease, that's big. And so you begin to process that, and then your decision is, what do we do? Do we tell people? How do we move forward from here? Yeah, and if you go online and you look for advice on that, it's going to tell you, tell people, let people know. People will make mistakes, we already know that, but at the core, most people want to support and love you through that. So that really is the encouragement to get comfortable talking about it, letting people know. It's helpful to think about, what is this like for the spouse? It's scary initially. I think what we know is there's going to be change. Sometimes we talk about that experience of change of roles. You create a partnership with somebody, you get to that place where life works and you have a history. And with the diagnosis with Alzheimer's disease, you can have lots of good things in front of you. There's lots of opportunity, but it's going to be different. And there's a gradual shifting in roles from a partnership to a caregiving role and how that's going to be. People need to learn to manage as tasks become more difficult. That can be frustrating. People will vary on their insight in terms of what's happening. Some more so than others will recognize, I used to be able to do this and I can't. Or I've had conversations with people and they can't get that word and it's frustrating for them. The communication piece is going to shift. Driving is a big deal. When is it, when do you stop driving and how do you make that happen? And very often people will involve their physician in that process. Sometimes it's real awkward if it feels like my husband's taken my car keys. It's easier if the doctor says to you, no more driving, or how you're going to maneuver that when it's no longer safe. Dealing with memory changes, living alone. There's a lot of people who have the diagnosis of Alzheimer's disease early on can continue to live alone with support. So, you don't want to overreact and, just, oh my goodness. It's very much about assessment. How are they doing? Are they safe? And so, but then, there's going to be a time when more support is needed. And then also we think about planning for the future. So that's kind of the broad look at it. Now what I wanted to do is ask you, I'm just going to ask you to take a moment or two, find a pen or pencil if you would, and on your notes, I would like you just to quickly jot down maybe 5 things that you feel would be needed for you to have a great day. I don't want you to be off on a cruise, just normal life. Normal life, what does it take to have a great day? What kinds of things are needed? So just jot down 5 or 6 of those quickly if you would. Okay, so a couple people tell me what's something you wrote down. Great day. Good sleep. Comfort. Sunshine. Conversation. Downtime. Good food. Yes.
Spending time with someone you don't have to do anything, spend time and just talking.
Some sort of meaningful connection with somebody. Good.
Some small success.
Okay, I want to do something. I want to feel like something got done. And so probably we're all thinking, yep, that would pretty much do it. That's a good day. And so when you think about the person who has dementia, what we're really trying to do is create that for them, right? Abilities are different and the day looks different, but ultimately what we're trying to weave in are those elements. We want to get away from the place, we're not curing them, it's this therapeutic environment where we're trying to create positive days for them that they can continue to live life to the fullest. So there's a psychologist by the name of Tom Kitwood who has some good books out there. He was really one of the first ones who got us out of the box and started thinking about, okay, how can we live with dementia? Enough with grieving, and losing it all. How can we live with this disease? Because so far it's not going away. And he said there's several things that people with dementia need. And you can see the heart of it is to be loved, to feel valued and cared for. He said they need to feel attachment to people around them. Now back to what Linda said, they might not remember you. They might not greet you warmly. They might even be cross when you come in the door to visit. But with dementia, we can read that, we can give space, rethink our approach, but we don't want to be wounded and stop the relationship, okay? So we want to promote that attachment. They need comfort. They need to feel a sense of identity. In occupation, they need to do things. We were just talking with a class participant last week who just said, I don't know what to do with my mom. I don't know what to do. And our trainer, Heather, said, well, what did she used to do? Well, she loved to cook and bake, and, well, do you bake cookies with her? And she's, I hadn't thought of that. You know, that it doesn't have to be, sitting down, talking, reminiscing. A lot of times people do better if we do something that they can be successful at. And they need to feel included. One of the things that we remind people of over and over is it matters when you talk to people. They're going to make mistakes. They might even take the conversation over here when you meant it to go here, but you're going to keep them included. It's very tempting to go, wow, that's not working out very well. I'm just going to talk to Diane, her daughter or whatever. But then we're missing it. We want to allow for those errors and keep them included. That makes a difference. Ultimately, what Tom Kitwood found, and this makes it easy for us, is that people with dementia have the same feelings and needs as the rest of us. Treat them like we would want to be treated. So these are some images, and I included them just to get us away from some of those stereotypes, because it's not about dementia. Really, this whole talk is about people. And then there's this diagnosis. So people with dementia enjoy caring for others. Isn't this great? That's her caregiver. And she's happy because she's able to give. How do we feel when we can give and bless others? We feel good, right? So we don't want to take that away from the person with this diagnosis. Very often what they love the most is nurturing and caring for others. You've probably seen some of those TV specials where they have the baby doll. Some people go back to that motherhood place. I need to do something industrious. I'm going to care for this little one. People with dementia respond well to choices and compliments. They love a good chat. They enjoy using their gifts and sharing what they know. This is a woman who used to teach sign language. And so they would have opportunities where she would teach some of her peers sign language, and she felt great about that, and other people found that interesting. So they were just bringing so much meaning into her day. People with dementia enjoy creative projects and purposeful activity. Now, this is a really interesting thing, and we're looking at a lot of research as we're fine-tuning our memory support program. There's some neat research that's pointing to the parts of the brain that allow us to be creative functioning quite well through the progression of Alzheimer's disease. And so there's some energy to say, hey, we get that you haven't been painting pictures your whole life, but try this, because it seems like it draws people into this place of being engaged and enjoying that moment. Like, creativity is a lot about freedom. You're doing something, but like Linda said, it's successful. I'm not going to miss on this. So I'm going to show you a video in a moment that there's these art therapy programs that are really trying to tap into this. But with that, I would add, it's individual. Because I can show you clients who'll say, I'm not painting that, I'm not interested in that, that's not for me. Go with the flow, that's all right. We're gonna take our feedback from the person in terms of what's going to work. People with dementia often enjoy giving and receiving affection. So we don't want to move away from them. I think as family members, and if you're supporting friends in this place, one of the things I would just encourage you, there's going to be probably places where you get your feelings hurt. It is hard to walk into your parents' room and they can't remember your name. Or something comes out of their mouth, you expected a blessing or a warm welcome, and something hurtful comes out instead. And we need to get really good at saying, that's a disease process. That's not his heart or her heart. So we kind of have to separate from that. The best thing, the most godly thing, is if you need to back up and have somebody encourage you, perfect, but don't leave the relationship. Because those behaviors, remember, that's not who they are. That's the progression of the plaques and tangles in the brain, and that's just coming out. So keep that relationship moving forward. With the affection, again, some people, there's time, they need space. There's overstimulus. We don't just go, oh, you have dementia, I'm going to give you a big hug. I would need to get to know that person. Is that something that they're comfortable with? I want to take my cues from the individual. So here's this word again. We've talked about this a couple of times, this word engagement. And we're emphasizing it because this is a shift. Our whole lives are about getting things done, right? You start, you keep at it, and then it gets done. And then we feel good about that. It's done. With Alzheimer's disease and dementia, we're rethinking that. A lot of things don't get done. And what happens is that the goal isn't to finish the task necessarily. The goal is to enjoy the moment. So for us Western, fast-paced individuals, this is really hard. So if I set out to have my mom who has Alzheimer's disease, to go for a walk in the park, and we get down the front steps and she's agitated and it's not going well, probably the best thing for me to do is sit down on the front step and just pause and reconsider the event altogether. Or maybe we go, wow, we're going to try this art thing, let's see what happens, and it gets started and that person stands up and walks away. That's all right. I don't need to get you back in your chair. I don't need you to finish, right? What we're trying to do is help them find success in their day. So this is just a guide that we often use with staff because we want to create engagement. We know that if we can connect you with your outer world, if we can pull you out and engage you for little bits of time, that is helpful. But we also recognize, like the interaction that you saw in the video, that doesn't happen every time, right? And we have to be okay with that. And so active participation says, oh, this person, they're cooking with us, they're interacting maybe, they're enjoying it. Maybe there's silent participation where you're in with the group and you're with the activity, but you're not verbally engaged. To distant, you're actually more comfortable sitting over there, but we still think it's valuable for you to be around others and to be in the midst of passive. I'm really not doing anything, but at least I feel that sense of community. So, it's kind of a continuum. They're all valuable. And so I don't want you to feel like, oh, Guy, they're not actively participating. This isn't working. That might not be what they're able to do at that time. They might be a little further down the continuum and still getting enjoyment from the activity. We talk a lot about meaningful activity. And so what we're looking for is how can we make this day good, right? And we know to do that we need to weave in activities that are meaningful for that person. Linda used the word earlier, well-being. And that is a term that was put forward by Tom Kitwood, that psychologist, who said, we want to watch the person for signs of well-being. If I go back one, it's actually why I chose this. If you look at his face, you're like, oh, he looks relaxed, he's comfortable, he seems engaged in the moment. That's well-being, as opposed to the person who's anxious or agitated or distraught. That would be ill-being. And so what we say to our staff, You know, we're not trying to teach, we're not trying to finish projects, we're trying to create well-being for these individuals. And one of the tools that we have to do that is meaningful activity. So meaningful activity can be any bit of the day that creates engagement or that sense of well-being. Very often meaningful activities involve daily care. There's a video that we showed to our team for a bit, and it showed a wife who was caring for her husband, and she said, you know, initially I would be so stressed in the morning trying to get him up and get dressed and help with this, and there was all this tension. And then she said, finally it dawned on me, what is the rush? What am I trying to hurry to? And she said, it dawned on me, getting socks on is the activity. So she said, I would hand him a sock and I'd say, why don't you see if you can get this sock on your foot here? And he would get started, and she said, I could go and dust or put laundry in the washer, and then I'd come back and say, oh, let me help you, here's another sock. What, you know, but that was meaningful, and it took that stress out of that morning routine. These are some of the recommendations that we give to caregivers when they are helping with daily care activities. One of them is to respect preferences and patterns. Again, we're going to be flexible, but we often find that people do best when we stay close to what's kind of been their life pattern. You know, how many of you would say you are an early riser? Up early, that's what I do, all right. And how many of you would say I'm a night person, night owl? See, and that's pretty innate in us. And so if I'm a caregiver, the first thing I want to do is look at what is this person's pattern, because if I stay close to that, that's probably going to be helpful. Then the next kind of key foundation is to support the remaining skills and abilities to maintain their independence. One of the mistakes that's the easiest to make because we're well-intentioned is to do too much. Think, oh, you know, she has this disease and this is hard for her, so let me just step in and help her do that. Now, I'm going to pick on you, Holly, but if Holly is my loved one who has Alzheimer's disease, and I say, oh, well, let me just help you get dressed because that's so hard for you now, what happens to Holly in terms of engagement and well-being, right? She begins to lose a sense of independence. And so what we want to do as caregivers is support you. Well, you know, here's your top, you know, what can you do? And as much as they can do, we want to support that. One of the things that's interesting is that for some people, as they approach a task, they do nothing. And you think, oh, they can't do it. But it's interesting because I find that sometimes if you start them in a task, they can continue the task, you know, and so you kind of get them started with things, see how they do, back off. You want to support independence. You want to meet the needs that we talked about earlier, so it's very relational, trying to stay away from being really task-oriented, you know, we got to get done. Creating safe environments, and then aiming for flexible routines that promote security. Let me stop for a minute and see if anybody has any questions. Yeah?
What do you do when things like hygiene comes into issue, they don't want to, you know, shower or bathe, or, you know, how do you let them have preference?
That's a great question. You do a couple of things. You start kind of assessing it and going, okay, what about the experience is uncomfortable or they don't like? You can try making adjustments. What if I did it at a different time of the day? You know, can I add music? Can I make it more fun? We try to figure out what's the part that they don't like. Maybe there's something easily that we can fix. The other thing, it becomes very much relational. Sometimes if I am talking with you and we get engaged and then we transition to something you don't like as much, it goes a little bit better. Or sometimes I figure out, you know, your favorite thing is a donut and a cup of coffee. And so, you know, let's clean up and get this done. We often try to avoid the words bath or shower. Sometimes that just, You know, let's clean up and get this done, and then we'll go have our coffee. So there's strategies. What we say to our team members is you try to have kind of this toolbox. And you say, well, I'm going to try this. If it doesn't work, that's okay. Then I would try this. If that doesn't work, that's okay. I'll try this. And maybe I would back off and come back again later. Some of those kinds of things. Is there anything you would add to that?
Well, also, bathing is a very private thing. We don't invite other people in there with us usually, so a wash up is easier, something just like a sponge bath, just something by the sink. Immersing people or putting, especially water over the head and face can be very, very disturbing to people. So however you can just kind of ease it up, make sure that we're providing for good privacy for people because they'll be very sensitive. But a wash-up, we find, is much less threatening to people than the whole, I'm completely naked and I'm sitting under the shower with you standing there. So there are, and again, like Pam said, just try different things. But however you can soften it.
Good. Any other questions? Okay. Okay, so meaningful activity is daily care. Meaningful activities are also leisure, and this might be where a lot of you are involved more so than maybe giving direct care or helping someone with it. So this is where we say, okay, this person in my church, I care about them, what can I do? And so these are some ideas in terms of meaningful activities. And I also would just free you up to say, if you go visit somebody and that person seems agitated, that probably means they're not having a great day. It doesn't mean you shouldn't go visit again, okay? Because that upset them. Not necessarily. It probably had nothing to do with you. It probably had everything to do with the morning or the day or whatever. So you do have to get okay with there's going to be good days and not so good days, and that's okay. Some ideas for meaningful activities, conversations, using Linda's strategies. I often find when I visit with people with Alzheimer's disease, it's helpful for me to have something. Because so much of the conversation is resting on me, I like to have a picture, I love to have a book. If they love flowers, I like to bring some flowers. It just sort of takes all that pressure off of me. And then we can just talk about that thing, something that's interesting. You can even take print a picture off of the internet, something interesting, and just, I brought this to look at with you. What do you think of this? And, we've done reminisce groups with people before where you start with something really basic, and, you can get talking about your favorite Christmas gifts, or how did you celebrate your birthdays? I mean, the heart of that, when I'm just interacting with somebody, it's not that, we need to talk about this and set goals and figure this out. We just need to have a moment. In the minute that I see you relaxed and engaged in talking, we're succeeding. It doesn't matter if we're talking about Christmas or something more significant in their lives. We're talking and they're engaged. The ADL's meal times can be a time for meaningful activity. Physical activity, this is an interesting one. What they're finding is that, and you'll be so glad to know this, if you have dementia and you exercise, you do better. Sound familiar to anyone? That message just does not go away, does it? If you're exercising, you'll do better. We partner with Senior Fitness at Providence, and they tell us that when you do cardiovascular exercise, I'm on the treadmill, I'm riding the bike, it increases oxygenation to my brain, and it tends to support good brain activity. Does it stop the plaques and tangles? No. But it tends to support more positive behaviors. In our new memory support programs, one of the things we're going to try to do is identify times of day when people get agitated or uneasy, schedule their exercise at that time of the day, because that tends to help. It tends to kind of minimize some of that anxiety feeling for people. So if you're not exercising yet, you might as well start, right? Because they're going to keep telling us you should be exercising. Arts and crafts. I'm going to show you the video in a minute. I'll talk about that. Linda talked a little bit about cognitive stimulation. It's really pretty fun. We have computer programs at some of our campuses. There's one that'll teach you to fly a plane virtually, right? So you sit down and it gives you directions and learn to fly the plane. But what you're doing is you're making the brain think. You know, I saw you when you're trying to count backwards by sevens. I hate that one. Linda actually brought up about cognitive testing, and I said, apple, table, penny. Because there's a real standard test that people use, and they usually make you repeat 3 words, and it's usually apple, table, pennies. I'm already practicing, right? So I can pass the test. Apple, table, penny. I got it. Cognitive stimulation in gardening is another great idea of leisure activity. But again, you know, obviously the list is not exhaustive. You go to the person. What do they love? What could we do that would tap into that?
It's super fun, but go ahead, Coach, maybe I can advance it. Just because it's hard to watch it when it's pausing.
But you can get a little glimpse there of just people very relaxed, very fun, very engaged. So it's a long ways away from that, you know, losing it all dark place that we sometimes think of. And you see these adults and, you know, this creative space doing things that they seem to be enjoying a lot. And it really does hopefully just kind of spark your imagination of, okay, what could this look like? I think I'm going to just take a moment and do this one activity because I want to help you apply these ideas just a little bit. So if you can find a little bit of white space on your page and just down, if you would write the word engaged going down, just write it vertically on your page. Now, as we do this, keep in mind that a meaningful activity may be as brief as 30 seconds. Okay, these are not hour-long exchanges. These are short moments in time when we just sort of stop and work to engage the person. What I want you to do is use those letters as an acronym and see how many activities you can think of. So for G, I might put get a cup of coffee. You know, so let's take just a few moments, see who can do this first, to fill in all those letters. A meaningful activity that you can think of that might work for the person who has Alzheimer's disease. Like, it's worth trying it. It might work. And see how many you can think of. Oh, we have a winner. What's your first name? Kathy. Good job, Kathy. Okay, Kathy, what'd you put for E?
Electric slide.
Electric slide. I love it. How about somebody, what'd you put for N?
Nap.
Nap. Sign me up for that one, right? How about a G?
Game.
Games. Good. How about an A? Arrange your what?
Arrange my colors.
Your colors?
Arrange things like that.
Oh, sorting and arranging. So good. What did you say, Tim? Oh, okay. So you get the idea of that, where you just want to sort of have quick ideas. Sometimes we say to loved ones, if their person is in a residential care setting, have a box. Create a little box or a little bag of things that they like. Maybe there's lotion, maybe there's a game, maybe there's a little photo album. Just an activity that you could try together. You know, it just kind of gives you something quick that you can go to do something. Because if the conversation is just not going well, or the person's difficult to engage, just have a little idea box. Let's try this. Those are meaningful activities. So let me pause. Anybody have any questions before we take a break again? Yes.
Diagnosing Alzheimer's. I know the definitive diagnosis used to come on autopsy, but now with MRIs, can they see those plaques and tangles? And what other kind of things do they do to diagnose?
You know, it's interesting because I just heard a neurologist address this, and so her job is diagnosing dementia, and that is what she does. And they try to track their success with that. So actually comparing their patient their early diagnosis, you know, with what do we find after autopsy. And they figure they're in the 90% for accuracy. Most of the diagnostics right now are verbal, interactive, collecting background information, talking with family. It's non-invasive tests. They often do labs and background things, I think medically as well. There are some diagnostic tests out there that are very good, but they're still very expensive. Like, it might cost you $4,000. And so she said, we're really hardly using it, but we're also finding that what we do use in the office is very good. So the other thing that with diagnosis that I would add, you know, that's scary for people, and oftentimes people don't want to go off to rush to do a day at the memory clinic. So I encourage people, start with your physician who you know, and just ask him, let's do a memory screen, because it seems like something's different. Can we just start to get a baseline and see what's happening there? Often people will go and they'll say, well, there's some memory changes, but it's fine. And you go back again next year. You know, you just kind of be proactive in that, but it often is easier with somebody you're comfortable with. I did want to add one other word. You all probably don't do this, but I do. One of the hazards of conversations like this, or for Linda and I working in this setting, is just that experience of evaluating yourself. Are you finding that, right? Yeah. I think I have it. You know, half the time I would say, I think I have it. It's helpful to know that typical aging, we tend to start to experience memory changes around age 40. Some of you already knew that. And so that's very normal. And what you find is it dawns on you, my memory is not what it used to be. In subtle ways, but you also find, you know what, if I write things down or if I do this and this, it seems to be fine, it's just different. That's probably normal aging. And so, you know, we don't want you to all leave thinking, 1 in 5, oh no. At the age of 65, right now Alzheimer's Association says it's 1 in 10, which says to me 90% of people don't have it, right? So you want to keep that in mind. That said, if you're at a place where you're unsure, get your memory screened. It's just not a big deal. It's not invasive, and it actually can be just very nice to have a clinical person say, I see that you have these changes. It seems you're very functional. There's not any safety issues. You know, keep doing what you're doing, or, you know, come on back next year and we'll check again. So, yeah, good question. Any other questions? All right, good. Stand, stretch. Refresh your coffee if you would like to. We'll start in just a few moments with our final session.